Hey Over Sports, Jacob over here. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Badgers and whether or not the Badgers could actually miss the college football playoff this year if they go undefeated. Now, the rankings were released a few days ago on Tuesday. The Badgers were ranked 8th in the country. They only moved up one spot. Ohio State and Penn State both fell out of the top 10, so currently the Badgers are the highest rated Big Ten team in the college football playoffs, behind Miami at 7, TCU at 6, Oklahoma at 5, Clemson at 4, Notre Dame at 3, Georgia at 2, and or Alabama at 1, Alabama at 2, and Georgia at 1. Sorry. So I've been hearing a lot of people talk about how a one-loss or a undefeated Badgers team could be left out of the playoff if they win the Big Ten. And let me say, a lot of people think that the Big Ten is weak this year, but the Big Ten is a conference that really beats itself up. There are a lot of good teams in the Big Ten that don't really have the best record because, well, the Big Ten is just pretty good. I'm not going to say that the Big Ten West is a gauntlet because it's not even close to that. It is pretty weak when you look at it, but the Badgers, take this into account, the Badgers just beat Indiana, and Indiana has only won 3 games all year. And a lot of people say, oh, that's not a good win, Indiana's a terrible team, but Indiana really isn't a bad team at all. I mean, they're taking teams like Michigan and Michigan State down to the wire. They've looked pretty good this year, but their record doesn't show it. And I think that can be said about a lot of Big Ten teams this season. The Big Ten, it doesn't have the star power that some of the other conferences have, but it's still a very good conference, and I think that a lot of people look at the Big Ten West and look at the teams in the Big Ten West and their record and say, oh, they're bad. Well, Iowa has lost 3 games this year, and yet I would consider them one of the better teams, if not one of the best teams in the Big Ten this season. They are a very dangerous team, and the Badgers are going to have to be on their A game to beat them this Saturday. Now, Wisconsin going undefeated on a Big Ten schedule, regardless of opponent record, to me, taking into account the fact that the Big Ten beats itself up and that there are a lot of good teams in the Big Ten that don't necessarily have the best records, I think that has to seriously be taken into consideration. The Badgers going undefeated on a Big Ten schedule, if you say any team going undefeated on a Big Ten schedule, you have to put them in the conversation. And I really think that their 8th ranking was far too low. If you saw my rankings the day before, I put Wisconsin at number 4. I thought that I still think they are the 4th best team in the country. I would put them over TCU and Clemson and Oklahoma. I would seriously do that. I just think that they're a very underrated team, and people just look at the teams they've played and the records they've had and say, oh, they're bad. The Badgers only beat them by 2 touchdowns. They only beat Illinois by 2 touchdowns. They suck. No, they don't. Illinois isn't a good team. Absolutely not. But going undefeated on any Big Ten schedule is very, very hard to do. And I think a lot of people overlook that. It doesn't matter the record of the opponent. The fact that you're in the Big Ten and you're still undefeated at this moment, while teams like Ohio State and Penn State aren't, that has to say something, doesn't it? Now, if Wisconsin goes undefeated, these next 2 games they have are potentially going to be against 2 ranked opponents. Definitely Iowa. Iowa is number 20 in the college football playoff ranking, and I believe that Michigan, after beating Maryland, if they beat Maryland, I should say, they will be moved back into the top 25. I believe Michigan right now is a top 25 team. So if undefeated, Wisconsin would have anywhere from 2 to 4 ranked wins, depending on who they play in the conference championship, and how teams like Iowa and Northwestern and Michigan end the season. Northwestern has actually made itself all the way into the top 25. They're at number 25 right now, so that's a little bit surprising. But on the other hand, though, with Wisconsin being ranked so low at the moment, you can't help but wonder. I do understand the people who say, is Wisconsin really a playoff team? You can't help but wonder what happens if the teams above them simply don't fall. I mean, the Badgers, I talk all about the Big Ten schedule they have and how it's very hard to do it, but they really haven't looked that impressive, in my opinion. I mean, for an undefeated team, they've looked about as unimpressive as an undefeated team can look. And obviously, I think that might change over the next few weeks, but it's understandable that people would think that, well, the Badgers haven't been playing as well, so I don't think they should be ahead of teams that have played tougher opponents. Now, I do believe the Badgers will need at least a little bit of help to get into the playoffs. I think that a Georgia-Alabama SEC championship, that would put the loser of that game out of the playoff. I don't think that the committee is going to put two SEC teams into the playoff. Because, I mean, that would just eliminate the whole purpose of the SEC championship. It would be a meaningless game if the committee was going to take both of the participants. Whoever loses will be out of the playoff. I can almost guarantee you that. If Notre Dame loses again, Notre Dame is out. Notre Dame does not play a conference championship. They are not in a conference, and they have one loss. So 2 losses for Notre Dame, plus sitting out conference championship weekend, they're out. The loser of the ACC championship, who would either be Clemson or Miami, they'll be out. And whoever wins the Big Ten, whether or not be Oklahoma or TCU, they'll be in. So you have the ACC champ that'll be in, you have the SEC champ that'll be in, you have the Big 12 champ that'll be in, and that leaves us with Notre Dame and Wisconsin. If you're a Wisconsin fan, you are the biggest Miami Hurricanes fan ever this weekend. Because a 2-loss Notre Dame team absolutely is out, and that puts Wisconsin in the driver's seat. Even if Notre Dame wins out, though, I question if the committee will even put them in, even though they're ranked 3 right now. Because if Wisconsin wins out too, it's going to come down to the committee choosing between an undefeated Big Ten team who won their championship or a Notre Dame team with a loss that's sitting out championship weekend because they don't play in a conference. And the committee has said numerous times that they value conference championships above everything else. And honestly, I have a really hard time believing that the committee could even justify leaving out a undefeated Power 5 team in the first place. I mean, do they even have the guts to do that? Could you imagine the backlash? I mean, it would be unbelievable. I mean, they'd be criticized, scrutinized. People would be calling for an expanded playoff or a new system beside the playoff. I mean, what's the point of playing the season if you're going to go undefeated in the Big Ten and still not make the championship or the playoff, I should say? I mean, you can justify putting the Badgers ahead of a 1 or 2 loss non-conference championship and saying, oh, the Badgers won the Big Ten, they're undefeated. It makes sense, right? But it would be really hard for me or anybody to justify leaving out a team that has won every game on their schedule that also won their conference in favor of a team that has losses or a loss. Not to mention the Big Ten being left out of the playoff is something the committee in the past has shown that it's unwilling to do. Possibly because the Big Ten brings with it the highest ratings. So my final opinion on this is that I believe that if Wisconsin, as an undefeated 13-0 Big Ten championship, I believe they would find a way to squeak in by virtue of the craziness of college football and the committee's eventual unwillingness to leave out an undefeated Big Ten champion. Now, I do think they might need some help. They need either Alabama or Georgia to eventually lose, and I think one of them will. They'll probably mean the SEC championship. I believe that they need ACC. They need either Clemson or Miami to fall out. They need either TCU or Oklahoma to fall out, but I think this will all take care of itself due to the championship games. So I do believe teams above them will lose eventually. I think the Badgers, if they keep winning, they'll keep moving up. It's going to be slow. I think by the conference championship, they might be up to number 5. And a win in the conference championship plus a Georgia loss or a Clemson loss or something like that, that would keep them, that would knock one of those teams out and thus create space for Wisconsin. Unless there's some incredibly likely scenario that plays out that I haven't thought up of, I think the Badgers are going to be in if they win the rest of their games. So, anyways, that's my opinion on it. If you have any other differing opinions, or if you want to comment on my opinions, leave a comment in the section below. This is a lot of fun to make this video. I hope you guys leave a like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.